You give mommy a besito?
No! It is time to get cooking. I'm Jacqui Saldaña, and I've been creating simple and delicious recipes on my website for more than 10 years with my family. And now I'm inviting you into my kitchen to come cook along with me while I show you how to easily create weeknight dinners, decadent desserts, and everything tasty in between. I keep it real, and most importantly, I keep it simple. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss out on our weekly videos. And now, let's see what we're making today. Hello everyone, we are actually outside in my little tiny garden that I actually share with my carport. I started this back in August 2020 with this green stalk tower garden, and this is actually really cool because it is all these tiers here, and the only thing I have to do really is water the top, and then it funnels the water evenly down into all of my compartments. And what's the most important is my lovely kale here that's in the center. I'm growing a handful of different varieties of kale, and we are actually going to harvest some to use for our kale potato tacos. That is what we're making today. It's the perfect weeknight meal, very easy, hearty, delicious. And yeah, so let's harvest some kale. I planted this kale back in the fall. The kale actually does really well in the winter months. So I planted all this kale, and I've actually been using it for salads, kale chips, and now I'm using it in a taco recipe. And I don't know, it's become a little bit of a passion of mine to kind of learn as I grow. Haha, get it? Since starting my green stalk garden, look how easy, I can just turn it like this. I've actually started an in-ground garden bed, and there I have potatoes, I've got rosemary. I also grew corn last year, and behind me, I think you can kind of see, I'm growing some snap peas, which is very exciting because they're already starting to come in. They are so good. You can eat them right off the vine. And behind me, I've got broccoli, beets, and some cabbage that's finally starting to come in, and I can't wait to see how my beets turn out. And the broccoli is just popping off. It's awesome. I've got garlic in these grow bags over here. I've got some onions. I've got mint. This is a curly kale, and it's so green that it's almost like bluish, if you can see that. And the best time to harvest kale is actually in the morning or in the evening when it's a little bit colder. It does something really great for the taste. And I do want to tell you that I have an organic garden here, so that means I don't use any pesticides or anything like that. But you can see, if you look on the back of these leaves, you see those little brats there, those tiny little buggies? Those guys eat my kale sometimes. So we're gonna take this in and we're gonna wash it. One of my readers told me that, here's some more of them. One of my readers told me that a successful garden is one that critters like to be in. So that makes me feel positive, but they're still annoying. So if you can see that all this kale looks really great. Look at this beautiful ruby red chard. This is really good scrambled with eggs or cooked down with a little bit of bacon. But anyways, let's get back to the kale. We're gonna take this aside. We're gonna give this a nice, good wash to get all of our little friends off the leaves. And we're gonna start making some tacos. So let's go. Once I rinse it off, I'm going to lay it on a dish towel and make sure it gets nice and dry, and then we'll move on to the rest of the recipe. All right, so I have given my kale a good wash here. The key here before we move forward is to really give it a chance to fully dry. Then if we try to just bake this with it still wet, it wouldn't crisp up like we want it to. So tonight we're making kale and potato tacos, and this recipe actually was born last year out of sheer necessity. We had no meat in our freezer, we had barely anything left in our fridge, and we were having a craving for tacos. So we put together what we had, kale and potatoes, and what ended up happening was something very delicious, and it was hearty and very nutrient dense with the kale and the potatoes, and I am using cumin and chipotle, and we just jazzed it up with some sour cream, which I'll show you how to make that absolutely delicious as well. I am using russet potatoes for this, but you can use yellow potatoes, red potatoes, whatever potatoes you have on hand. And I like to leave the skins on, so I've already given these guys a nice wash and dry. So I've actually noticed that my potato has started to sprout a little bit, which is fine. You just want to go ahead and slice off any sprouts, and the potato will taste just fine. I'm growing my own potatoes out in my garden, and they actually take quite a bit of time before you actually even put them in the ground. And what I'm doing right now, I'm actually here in California, you can pretty much grow potatoes all year round, so I've read. And one of the ways to prep your potatoes is actually called chitting them, C-H-I-T-T-I-N-G, I think. And basically what that means is you let them sprout before you put them in the ground, and then you cut off the sprouts and let them hang out for a day or two, and then you put them in the ground. And I'm actually doing that right now, and I'll show you what it looks like. I've got them hanging out in an egg carton, and they are just sprouting away, looking gorgeous. And so in a few days, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna cut these sprouts off, and then I'm gonna let them hang out for a little bit longer, and then I'm gonna put them in the ground with the sprouts facing up, and then they'll start to grow. So I have a pan here. I'm gonna have it on medium heat, and I've got some olive oil, and I'm going to add in my potatoes. I'm gonna add some salt. And once they are fork tender, I'm gonna add in the spices. If you added in the spices and the garlic at this point, they would just burn, because the potatoes need some time in the pan to actually cook and soften up. So that way they don't burn, and they'll just nicely toast up right before it's time to eat them. All right, so we have our kale here, and it's nice and fully dry. And what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna rip it up into bite-sized pieces. You can use the kale leaves when you're making like chicken broth or vegetable broth, but that's a total preference. You can do whatever you'd like here. And again, you wanna make sure they're all kind of relatively the same size, so while you're cooking them, they all cook at the same rate. I love kale. But if you are not a fan of kale, you can certainly top your tacos with spinach or Swiss chard, but I think the only really leafy green that can hold up in the oven would be kale, because it's nice and hearty. So I've just drizzled about 2 tablespoons of olive oil over the kale, and I've got some pepper here and some salt to really season up this kale. But toasting it in the oven will give it a nice crispy texture and will taste awesome on top of the tacos. All right, so we have our oven set at 350 degrees, and we're gonna pop this in the oven and let this crisp up for about 10 to 15 minutes, or just until the leaves start to turn golden brown. Look how delicious and toasty golden that is. Awesome, so we're gonna give these guys a little flip and turn down the heat a bit. So they're gonna get nice and crisp on the outside, but I'm gonna cover them so the steam will help soften up and cook down the potatoes. So I've got a tablespoon of cumin and a teaspoon of chipotle powder. It looks more than it is because it's spread out here on the plate. And I've got a little bit more black pepper. And you cannot have, or at least in my world, you cannot have potatoes without garlic. This is one of my favorite kitchen gadgets, especially because I love kale, especially because I love garlic so much. I eat it almost every day. You can certainly add an onion to this. You can also add black beans. They are ready to rock. In goes my garlic, and then in go my cumin, my chipotle powder, and I also added a little bit more black pepper, which you can do or not do, totally up to you. And you're gonna wanna let these kind of toast away for, I wanna say maybe like 5 minutes or so. So you can see they are just barely starting to turn golden brown, and I want to let you hear this delicious crunch. They are delicious. One of my family's secrets is to spice our sour cream. It just takes your sour cream to the very next level. Since this is a larger tub of sour cream, I'm going to just take about maybe a half a cup. And what I'm gonna do is add a couple dashes of our favorite hot sauce. You can use whatever hot sauce you have on hand. And then I'm gonna add in some of the chipotle powder that we used on the potatoes, just a little bit. I'm gonna keep this in our fridge in an airtight container. You can use this obviously to top tacos, burritos. You can use this as a dip. So tortillas, you can use whatever tortillas you have on hand. The recipe on my website shows corn tortillas, but what we have right now are flour tortillas, which is totally fine. And we're gonna get to building our taco. Oh, look at that. And I'm going to grab some of my kale, my crispy kale, a hearty dollop of my spiced sour cream right down the center. This taco is a handful of ingredients. It's hearty, it's delicious, it's perfect to whip together for a weeknight meal for your family. You can also add black beans in here for extra protein. The family's ready to eat. I always like to sneak in a bite before I call them in. So definitely check this recipe out. You can find it on my website, babyboybakery.com. And yeah, let me know if you're making kale potato tacos. Thanks for watching, everyone. So good.